Hey guys, it's Christian from TAKANI Electric Dirt Bikes. Today I want to take you through how you receive the bike, how you unpack it and how you assemble it step by step in your place. The tools you need for assembly of the bikes are normal DIY grade tools. So you're going to need wrenches, 8mm, 12mm, 14 and 17mm, or alternatively you can use your sockets, or shifter will do as well. You need Allen wrenches, 4mm and 5mm, and for unpacking your bike you're going to need a knife or some snips to cut the wires and the zip ties. First you unpack the box. Every TAKANI dirt bike comes fully encased in a steel frame. This is to ensure your bike arrives your place safely. So cut the sides of the carton box, fold the sides down. Remove the box with parts and accessories. Take your 5mm Allen key or your cordless tool and remove all bolts and nuts from the steel frame. Remove the top of the frame, put it aside, and now I can do it by hand, but you can take a 10mm wrench or a socket set and remove this part here. Take your snips or pair of scissors and remove all the zip ties you can find. They're all around the bike. Remove the bubble wrap. Make sure that you don't scratch or destroy any wires, cables or lines. And remove the front wheel. Get it all out of the way so that you have a clear workspace. Now unpacking is almost done. Just take your snips and remove these silver wires. There's one on the back wheel and another one is here at the footrest. Just cut it and carefully remove it. Don't throw these wires away. I explain you why now. So the steel frame or the base of the steel frame holds the bike upright while you assemble it. But you see these two poles here, they're quite pointy and they stick up. So I suggest take some of the packing materials and the wire you just cut off and secure. So just making sure that you don't fall on it or trip on it or hurt yourself in any way. Fold the wire ends down, it's nice and tight and safe. The other side, just take some bubble wrap, piece of plastic or a piece of paper, whatever you find, and cover it. Now it's nice and safe and we can continue assembling the bike. Okay, let's have a look at the box with parts and accessories we deliver. So you have your plastic number plate. In this box is your charger. You're going to need that later on. Very important, the user manual. So everything what we explain here, step-by-step assembly, is outlined in the user manual. In any case, please read the manual before you start any work on the bike, and also make sure that the rider understands all instructions in the user manual. Then there is a safety buffer for the handlebar joint, a spray guard for the rear wheel, some tools for assembly, and most importantly all nuts, bolts and accessories we need for the assembly now. And this is a spare charging port, so if you want to purchase a spare battery when you want to swap batteries and your youngster wants to ride them all day long, you can use this to charge the spare battery while the other battery is in the bike. You can assemble the bike in whatever sequence you want. We would recommend first installing the handlebar. So in your set of screws you're gonna see these big bolts. Take them out and you're gonna need these two silver handlebar clamps. So take the handlebar, make sure that you don't kink or bend any wires or lines, and remove the wrapping. Then you put the handlebar into the mounts. Take your two clamps and just by hand screw in the 4 bolts. Don't tighten them, just keep them loose. You just want to keep the handlebar a little bit attached. Also make sure you see these marks here. They show you somewhat the middle of the handlebar. Make sure that the marks have even distances to the clamps. Now take your 6mm Allen key and start tightening the handlebar carefully. Make sure that it's still centered and that it is in a comfortable angle for the rider. If you don't get it right the first time, it's not a big deal. Later on you can always adjust the handlebar as well as the brakes and all controls so that it's ergonomic for the rider. Take your 6mm Allen key and start tightening the bolts step by step and careful in an even pattern, and make sure that you achieve and maintain an even gap between the clamp and the base mount. Tighten the bolts nice and tight, because the handlebar connection is really, you can say, the most important connection of that bike. You don't want it to come off during riding. Next, we assemble our rubber shock guard in the rear. So what you do is lift the back of the bike, lift it all the way up. You see here's the rear shock, hold it up, remove the wrap and rest the shock between motor and the link. So take your shock guard and hold it in this way into the bike so that the cutout is on the right hand side. And there are two pre-assembled bolts here. Just take them out by hand, put them through the holes. Take your 5mm Allen key and just tighten the bolts. Remove the shock bolt, lift the rear of the bike so that the link is loose. Take the shock guard, put it over the link and slide the rubber between motor and frame. And keep holding the rear of the bike, because now you want to put the bolt through the link. Take your bolt, I'll do it from this side. You can let it go now, it's tight, and tighten the nut. Use a 12mm and 14mm wrench, socket set or shifter, whatever you have, and tighten. Make it nice and tight, it's a very important joint. You don't want it to come loose while you're using the bike. So next step, we assemble the mudguard, the front mudguard. Use the 3 holes, the one in the middle and the 2 in the back, 1, 2, 3. And you're gonna find 3 leftover bolts here in your pack. Take them out, put them from the bottom through the mudguard, so the one in the middle, and tighten it, first by hand. Make sure that the mudguard is straight and tighten by hand, nice and tight. Right. So take your front number plate, put these 2 dowels into the openings of the mudguard. Take the front brake line, put it through the slot here, and then take your Allen key and use these 2 bolts to mount the number plate. The next step is mounting your front wheel. In order to put the front wheel in, we need to get the bike off the steel frame. So the way how we do that is, we need to take the front axle out, take the nut of the front axle off, keep it, you need that, and then take some pressure of the bike, lift it up with one hand, and take carefully the axle out, step by step, and put the bike on the ground. So you're going to need the 2 spacers and the axle, put it aside, and then lift the whole bike off the frame. And now you can remove the base frame and all the packaging material. Make it nice and clean, that you have a good workspace. In order to mount the front wheel of your bike, you will need to elevate the front of the bike so that you have free access to the wheel. So you can either use one of our service stands and put the bike on, or you take a milk cradle, ordinary milk cradle works, or just take some timber blocks and put the base frame of the bikes onto the stand. And just make sure that the foot pegs are on the top plate. So the bike is elevated, the axle is out. The next step is we need to loosen the brake saddle and swing the brake saddle down. Loosen the top bolt of the brake saddle, then take the lower bolt out. So when you swing the brake saddle down, this brake line will actually tighten. So when you swing it down, make sure that the brake line sits in the cavity of the number plate. Yeah, and then nice and slowly swing the brake saddle down. And put the bolt in and tighten. Double check and tighten the upper bolt. Make it nice and tight. Double check whether the brake line is nice in the cavity and guided by the number plate, and that there are no kinks or no stress on the brake line. The bike is elevated, the brake saddle is mounted and tight. Now we mount the front wheel. You have two spacers. One is 1 or 2 mil higher than the other one. The longer one goes onto the brake side, the shorter one goes on the other side. Take your axle, slide it in a little bit, push the front wheel in, make sure that the brake disc is in between the brake liners. Then position the axle, take your smaller spacer, push the axle through, and now you try to push the axle through the wheel. And sometimes you're gonna have what I have, it doesn't go in. So when this happens, don't take a hammer or yank it in, there's a reason for that. So inside the hub there is a bearing, and you need to position this ring in the middle. When it is positioned in the middle, you can get the axle through. So take a tool, align it in the center, so that you can get the axle through. If it's very loose inside the hub, you can always get the axle through by just wiggling it. I show it to you. So align the brake disc into the liners, take your axle, take the smaller spacer, push it through, and now align the axle with the bearing, and then you wiggle the front wheel a bit so that the inner ring moves a bit. When the axle comes out from the other side, take your bigger spacer, put it in between. When the axle is all the way through, take your nut, put the nut on, make it nice and tight. And that's the assembly of your front wheel. Now the hard part is done. Just a few final touches and your bike is ready to go. So let's start with the brake lever adjustment. Take your 5mm Allen key and loosen the clamp of the brake levers. So what you want to do is, you want to adjust them for the rider so that the angle is a straight line of arm and fingers, so approximately like that. Tighten the screw. When you do that, don't over tighten, because you still want the brake levers to be movable by hand. And the reason why we do that is we want to make sure when the rider falls that the levers don't snap off, but they actually come up. So find the right tightness so that you can still move it a little bit by hand. And the other side the same. Open the bolt of the clamp, adjust it down, tighten the bolt, but not overly tight. Make sure that you can still move a little bit. Yeah, that's about it. Put the black plastic covers onto the swing arm axle on both sides. They just pop in. And then just cover the handlebar mount with your rubber buffer. And you can use this wrap to fix it in place. Now you're finished assembling your bike. Now just take some time and double check all bolt and nut connections. It's just good practice, and you want to make sure when you ride the bike the first time everything is in good order. Maybe start with the Allen key and double check the triple clamp bolts, the motor mounts, the foot pegs and the brakes. As a last step, you would put your fuse in. There might be an arc or a spark because there's some power in the battery line from testing. Don't be afraid, it's not dangerous. Just put it in, close the cover and make sure that the fuse is nicely tucked under the housing, like this. Now the assembly of your bike is finished. There's only one thing to do. Put the ignition key in, turn it, and the green battery gauge light comes on. That means the bike is ready to go. You see here an on and off switch. That's the emergency off switch for the bike. So if you want to ride with the bike, you need to make sure that the button is released. So now the button is released. Carefully actuate the throttle and the back wheel should spin. So you can adjust the speed and the power by dialing the two dials under this cover. Make sure when you ride the first time you set it on very low speed and very low power, just to test ride the bike, making sure that everything is okay. Now that your bike is ready to go, just take the protection covers of the stickers. Carefully make sure that you don't take the stickers off. Just tap them back on. They have come loose and you're ready to go. This is how we assemble our bikes. If you have any questions or feedback, how we can do things better, please let us know. And always, when you use a TAKANI dirt bike, please make sure you wear complete and approved protective equipment. Make sure that you ride on private ground, on private property. Make sure that you ride off-road and that you monitor and supervise the rider at all times. If you were happy with our video and if you want to know more about new products or tips and tricks, maintenance, service for our TAKANI bikes, please like and subscribe to our channel.